Spring is in the air. So excited. 60-degree weather this week. I want to talk about knowing, or rather not knowing. I've been coming up against this in subtle ways lately. Just doing things or having things happen in my life and not the mind having no idea why. The mind always likes to try to formulate meaning and make reasons why something in life is happening. But what I really came to recently is that I don't know why anything is the way it is. Nothing is known. There's literally nothing known. There's a lot of stories. There could be a lot of guesses, a lot of tales told, but the truth is nothing is known. The truth is I have no idea why I seem to live in West Virginia. I have no idea why my relationship ended. I have no idea why anything is the way it is. I don't know why I do anything that I do. It just happens. It's just what happens. And nothing else can be said about it. And that's been a really hard place for me to arrive at as a seeming person who was raised in an environment where knowing was so central to the identity. Jennifer's knowing was so central to this character. I grew up in an intellectual household where to know stuff was to be something, It was to be important. So I really built up a lot around knowing things, being smart. Not just being smart, but having answers to things. And putting so much pressure on myself to know stuff. And not just like facts. Yes, that was a big part of it, knowing facts and science and blah, 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 all the things. My background is I have a mechanical engineering degree. I come from a very intellectual household. I spent my whole lifetime training, training the mind to know shit, to know a lot of shit, really complex stuff. But really realizing at a certain point that all of that was just a mask or really a way to be comfortable or to try like a safety blanket for the fact that nothing can be known. Literally nothing can be known. And I think I've said this in a couple podcast episodes that Henry and I had recorded, but even in the scientific community, if you get down to, we can explain all day that okay, this is why the human body is this way, or this is why, from a physiological perspective, people get depressed or get anxious or what have you. There's all these reasons that we say for things, but then when you follow those questions down, if you follow any question down, in science, for instance, to the quantum level, you eventually have to get to a point where you have to admit, I don't know. Okay, matter, you could say matter exists, but then what's matter made of? Matter is made of atoms. Well, what are atoms made of? Atoms are made of this. Well, what's that made of? What's that made of? And you have to get to a point, if you follow it down far enough, you get to a point where you have to say, I don't know. I have no idea. Actually, I have no idea. Every fact in the relative world is built on a foundation that if you follow it down far enough, we have no idea. It's all just assumptions. It's all just ideas. It's ideas and concepts that have been formulated as a way to cope with the fact that we don't know. Ultimately, we have no idea what's going on here. We have no idea why this so-called universe exists. We have no idea why anything is happening. It's completely spontaneous and not in our control at all. And what I realized was that all of that knowing, that sense of knowing, that sense of wanting to be smart, to have answers for things, was a form of control. It's a form of maintaining some sense of security where there is actually none. And that's really uncomfortable, like getting to that place of having to admit, I don't know anything. That's really like the first step of a spiritual inquiry, is getting to a point of just, I don't know anything. And I've been running up against that in deeper ways, that I don't know just on a day-to-day basis. I don't know why I do anything. You know, there's just an impulse that arises in the body and it's followed. You know, and I could say like, oh, hunger. Oh, I want to go outside. You know, that's the reason. But ultimately, it's just what's happening. And then the mind attaches some sort of concept or sense of knowing to it as a way to try to make sense of the not knowing. But the truth is that it's spontaneous. That it's all just happening spontaneously. But what you are, it's a different kind of knowing. It's not a conceptual knowing. Knowing what you are is something the mind can never grasp. It's a type of knowing that the mind can never understand. It's a knowing that's beyond the level of the mind. And to the mind, it looks like the void. It looks like emptiness. It looks like chaos. Death. It looks like death to the mind. The mind can't know. So to admit I don't know anything is huge. I don't know why I do anything. I don't know why my life is the way that it is. Not only do I not know why I'm doing what I'm doing in every moment, but I can't know what's coming. I can't know where this is going. I can't know why things happened the way that they did. There's stories, you know, the mind creates stories as a way to, you know, feel secure in that like, oh, this, you know, and there's a realizing that, you know, as I processed all of my like deepest traumas, so really like all the functions, the egoic functions, the masks, the suppression mechanisms, all the ways that there was a suppression here of the spontaneity, the pure spontaneity, all the ways that that was being suppressed. You know, I could say on one level, the mind really tried to make sense of that. Like it could say like, oh, well, this mask, this way of suppression was because my upbringing looked this way and this was handed to me. But then the same thing, if you go far enough back, like I could say, oh, okay, that's because my parents did X, Y, and Z, or that's because X, Y, and Z happened in my life. But again, if we follow that question enough, okay, well, who handed it to them and why? If we follow that question enough, we get back to the same place of I don't know. I don't know. Ultimately, I don't know. I can't know. And children are great mirrors for that too. If anybody's been around a child who's in a stage of being very inquisitive and asking, well, why this? Why is the grass green? Why is this thing this way? You know, we can give them some sort of scientific answer of, oh, the grass is green, plants are green because they contain chlorophyll. Well, why? Why? If you follow that question enough, kids are really good at pushing us to that point of just continuing to ask the question why until we give up, throw our hands up and say, I don't know. I don't know. Every question leads back to that. Back to I don't know. if we're honest, if there's really like a sincerity and a willingness to be honest, everything leads back to I don't know. And that's a terrifying place to stand, because in that place of I don't know, there's no ground. There's nothing to hold on to. There's no certainty. There's no security. That I don't know what's going to happen 2 minutes from now. You know, there had to be a total letting go here. And that was terrifying, you know, in the midst of the height of all of these old functions and patterns completely breaking. There had to be a giving up and a willingness of, I have no idea where this is going. You know, in my relationship with Henry, there had to be a getting to a point of, I have no idea if this relationship is going to be here on the other side of this. But the masks were just felt too unnatural. It was like impossible to put them back on. It was impossible to, you know, like rebuild the suppression mechanisms. And so there had to be a letting go. There had to be a total willingness. And for some people, you know, like relationships will survive, but there has to be a total willingness for it to go any way, for it to end, for everything that you have in your life to be taken. And that's terrifying. That I don't know, that complete sense of uncertainty is terrifying. But it's in that giving up, in that like full embrace of I don't know, that there's finally a realizing that regardless of what happens, it's okay. Like everything's okay. And there was a point, you know, like 6 months ago where in me, like the thought of like losing my relationship was just, it created so much tension. Because there was such a sense of safety and security in it. It was my safety blanket, you know, in a time when I needed that. And there had to be a total letting go that like, oh, it's actually okay. You know, nothing here, nothing about what I am is lost. Regardless of what happens, regardless if I get hurt, regardless if I lose all of my money, regardless if I lose my relationships. And that's aloneness. Like that's real aloneness. There's an aloneness in this process of it's giving up all of the safety blankets. And really there were never safety blankets because you were never in control. You know, I had to realize that I was never in control anyways. So it's really just giving up the illusion of knowing. The illusion of safety, the illusion of control, the illusion of having a say, the illusion of a personal will that can, you know, guide and steer life. It's giving the only thing that's given up is illusion, and that's seen at some point. But getting there is hard. It was really hard for me. Like it was like life like forced my little hands open, you know, like pried my white knuckling hands open. You know, and it's only at that point that it's seen that like, oh, it's actually okay. It's like, this is where all the energy is. It's like hanging on so tight, but this is so effortless. But when it's been doing this for decades and decades and decades, like that's all it knows. It can't know this. It has a remembering of that, but it you know, there's like maybe a sense inside the body of just like the effortlessness of this. But the mind can't know that. Like it's beyond anything that the mind can understand. It's beyond any concept. You know, you can call it freedom, but even freedom is just a concept. It's just a word, and words get muddied by the experience of the ego and the experience of the separate self and the experience of the me. You know, every individual's concept of freedom is going to mean something different based on what their life circumstances have looked like. It's going to take on a slightly different flavor. Every word, love, you know, like there's these words that we use to describe. It's all the same thing. You know, you could say love, you could say freedom, truth, awakening, silence, stillness, emptiness, void, peace. It's all the same thing. Every single one of those words in this context are describing the exact same thing. It's not a thing, but, you know, describing what you are, what you really are. And it requires a complete letting go, which is terrifying. Complete letting go, a complete admittance of, I don't know anything. And it's not just concepts, you know, it's that too. But it's every way that there's ever been a gripping has to be let go of. And that's free fall. You know, you can't be in free fall if you're trying to hold on to ropes. You know, you can be in free fall and trying to grasp at something, but it doesn't work that way. You have to completely let go, completely lose any sense of orientation. And that was a really painful process here, as somebody that grew up, or, you know, that like formulated a sense of identity in knowing stuff and being smart. And really what this process is, I said this to somebody today, what this process is getting to a point where you really become the dumbest person in every room. And it feels so good. Especially after a lifetime of trying to be the smartest person in the room or trying to know stuff. That's, you know, being the dumbest person in the room it's effortless. And, you know, it's weird because from one perspective, it might look like wisdom or knowing stuff, but really it's not. Like, there is nothing here that is known. Nothing. There is a moment by moment impulse, intuition that like moves this body. And I have no idea why. I can't know why. It's spontaneous and it's free. That's what freedom is. And that's a hard pill for an ego, for a mind to swallow. I joked with Henry maybe like, I don't know, a month or 2 months ago, where I was telling him about just like a bitter pill that was trying to be swallowed, and it's just like gagging on that shit the whole way down. You know, like not knowing, giving up is like a bitter pill. Like it's a big ass pill for an ego to swallow, and it's probably gonna gag on it the whole way down. Or it might, I don't know, you know, for different people, different egos, it might look different, but that's what happened here. Gagged on that shit. But then it's seen that the gagging was unnecessary because there was nothing that was being gagged on. The pill was an illusion. The pill was just an idea. So, you know, there's still layers. There's layers of not knowing that are still coming through, and different ways that it's seen, that I don't know anything, can't know anything, that there is nobody to know anything. That's part of the not knowing, is I don't know what's going on here. There's no person here. There doesn't seem to be a person here. I don't know what that's about. It's weird. It's interesting. But it's just like coming to the direct experience, like in the senses, the direct experience of there's no person here. There's thoughts, there's sensations, there's, you know, sight, hearing, taste. I don't know what that's about. But there's nobody here experiencing it. It's just this It's coming to like be with the raw sensations and the like direct experience of what's happening without having to know, without feeling the impulse to know. And there's still moments of that, you know, and just like sitting in something and just the mind will be like, oh, this is why this is happening. And then catching myself getting caught in a moment of trying to know. And just, look at me. Look at this thing thinking that it knows something, or, you know, creating a story. So, you know, coming into acceptance of not knowing is hard. And part of it is allowing everything that's arising to arise, everything that has ever been suppressed, everything that's ever been pushed down and cast aside and judged as, you know, not worthy. Like every way that authenticity and spontaneity is hindered, gets put down. That's part of the not knowing. It's, you know, not knowing what's going to come up, or, you know, not knowing, allowing what's coming up and not knowing how someone else might react to it. That's part of the not knowing. That's, you know, one of the scariest parts of the not knowing from an ego's perspective is, well, what if I get rejected? What if I get abandoned? What if this person leaves me? What if I die? You know, like all of that stuff. And it's expressing the spontaneity and the authenticity regardless of the outcome, without knowing anything about the outcome, without knowing why it's arising, without knowing the outcome. And that's terrifying. It really is. But there comes a point when, or there came a point here when hindering that authenticity has just like started feeling so uncomfortable and just so like yuck, so loud, so obvious in the body, like almost painful in the body to hold back. And so that, you know, trying to know, or like that suppressing out of trying to control, or, you know, trying to know that like I'm going to be safe, I'm going to be secure, this person's still going to be here. All of that has to get put down. That's also part of the not, you know, part of the embrace of not knowing. And that's really scary. That was hard for me. But, you know, the strange thing, even though, you know, my marriage ended, there's like more of a love between the two of us than there ever was before. There's more of an embrace and like an unconditional just acceptance of the other. And even in my friendships and things like that, the more that those masks have fallen, like there was such a deep fear here, but the more those masks have fallen with my friends, with my family, the more richness there is. And it's like the things that were so feared, most of them didn't come to pass. And, you know, like, yes, my marriage ended, but that was such a deep teacher. I needed to let that go, to let go of certainty, because that was one of the biggest patterns here. You know, there's no, like, maybe it still will come up in ways, but just wanting to know, wanting to be loved, wanting to be accepted. But it's putting all the masks down and giving up the idea that I will be loved and accepted, that there might be resistance, there might be rejection, there might be abandonment, there might be all of those things. I have no idea. You know, that's why we create these masks, like as children, because it's as a child, our literal survival depends upon acceptance. The lack of acceptance like triggers survival instinct. So that's how those things get created. So as an adult, when we're going through this and putting down all of that knowing and embracing the not knowing, the survival instinct is triggered, which makes it hard. It's really hard. There was so much grief here, so much fear. But the only way to come to a knowing or a remembering of what you already are, literally what you have always been, is to let it all go. Just to let go of that white knuckling, baby. It's so easy once it's done. It's like, oh, well, what the heck was I afraid of? But when that gripping is there, it can feel so hard. It feels so real. Those stories feel so powerful. So it really is, like, giving up the knowing is scary. And there's so many layers of knowing, so many ways that we try to know. Try to predict how somebody might react, orient ourselves so that we'll be accepted. The mind tries to know stuff intellectually. It's all ways of suppressing that authenticity and the spontaneity of just the way this individual thing is expressing for whatever reason. Who knows why? I don't know why I do half the shit that I do. This thing is weird, and I don't know, has like weird quirks, and it likes stuff, and I don't know why it likes the stuff that it likes and why it does the stuff that it does, but it does. And it's just coming to see it and not take it seriously and just like, oh, this is the way that this thing is wanting to express. But it's when you know that what you are is not the way that this thing is expressing. It's the thing that is feeling the way that this is expressing, observing the way that it's expressing. Like, that's the truth. And it's untouchable. Then that's when things really open. That's when it doesn't matter anymore, the outcome. Because what you are can't be touched. That doesn't make it easier. That doesn't make the patterns and the trauma and the relative human shit feel any less real, feel any less scary. It doesn't. You have to go through all that stuff. Or I had to go through all that stuff. I had to dig through all that stuff in order to see that none of that was what I am, is what I am. None of that is the truth. It's all just an idea. But it had to be waded through. It had to be felt all the way to the bottom in order for this thing to express completely, authentically, wholly, without any obstacles, without any dams. It's the river flowing without a dam. You know, that you could say the ego is like a dam that we build up stone by stone over our lifetime, and there's this force behind it. But at some point, like, we've been building it for so long that we don't know why we're doing it. We've almost forgotten what it feels like to flow, for the river to actually flow. There's this little distant memory. And this, like, deconstruction is like chiseling out brick by brick, removing stone by stone. You know, the force of the water will blow through a lot of it, but you have to, like, dig down and go through it and do the hard work of removing it and feel the resistance of the water as it starts to flow through. You start to feel that force, and it's really uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Like, oh, the dam was never me, I'm the river. But we take ourselves to be the dam.